So you are now in charge of funding your trust, and that means we need to retitle some of your assets to your trust right now, and that way we can avoid the probate court if either you become incapacitated or when you die. This is a really important step if you have a trust, because most of the time folks have the goal of avoiding the probate court when they do create a trust. So it's on you. You need to spend some time doing this, but I'm going to walk you through some of the main categories of what you should be doing with all of your assets. And trust funding is one of those things you need to keep up on. So just because you do it once doesn't mean you're done. You will always be changing banks or acquiring different types of assets, and we need to make sure that we were always thinking through, do I need to either retitle this to the name of my trust, or do I need to do an updated beneficiary form so that you avoid the probate process? For checking, savings, brokerage accounts, and even for safe deposit boxes, we want to make sure that those assets are titled in the name of your trust right now. That way, if you become incapacitated, your backup trustee is going to be able to access those types of accounts without the need for going to court. So there's a few steps that you're going to need to take. First, you're going to need some documents that you take into your bank, and one of those will be the certificate of trust that is in the front of your estate planning binder if you've used our services, and that's the 2-page kind of document that's the driver's license of your trust, so to speak. It says who are the trustees, the trust name, the date it was executed, and your bank will need a copy of that. Banks usually also require things like the title page to your trust, copy of the signature pages to your trust, and maybe even the section showing that there are banking powers within your trust. Some institutions will say that they want an entire copy of the trust. That is not a requirement here in Arizona. Actually, legally, they are not allowed to ask for a copy of your trust unless they have a legal reason to do so, which they do not have. So feel free to just give them the excerpts of the trust that we've discussed. When you go into the bank, say, here's what I need you to do. I need to retitle, again, checking, savings, brokerage accounts, or safe deposit boxes in the name of your trust right now. Some institutions may say, you know what? Why don't we just do a beneficiary form? That's easier. For these particular assets, we recommend you put them into your trust right now. And that's because, again, for incapacity planning. We don't use a beneficiary form until you're dead. So if there is an incapacity situation, we need to have those accounts titled right now into the name of your trust. Here's a tip for you. Chase Bank won't do this. Chase Bank won't retitle your accounts into the name of your trust like almost all other institutions will. Online banks sometimes don't offer that as well. So in those particular circumstances, you're either going to open up a new account, for example, at Chase Bank, retitle or have a new account in the name of your trust. And if you have any direct deposits or withdrawals, you'll need to move those over to the new account name. And then eventually, once all of that happens, cancel or terminate your other account. Cars. Here in Arizona, we actually have beneficiary forms for our vehicles. And these are for trailers, ATVs, motorcycles, cars, whatever is titled here in Arizona. In your estate planning binder, we have given you some blank forms to use. These are actually the older forms that we prefer. The MVD also has updated forms on their website that you can also print off as well. The old forms, however, have a place for a notary signature or a witness, which we do like when we are doing beneficiary forms from a fraud standpoint. The newer forms actually don't have those places to be witnessed or notarized, and so we don't like them as much, but you can use those as well. And those are really simple forms. It's the VIN number, year, make, model of your car, who you want it to go to when you die. Again, this is a way not to have your asset go through your trust while you're alive, but we want to make sure those assets still avoid the probate court when you die. Retirement accounts such as IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, you want to make sure that those beneficiary forms are updated as well. Most people put their spouse and then their children as the backup beneficiaries. When you do have a trust, sometimes we will put it through to a trust on the beneficiary form, but that is only when you have a trust that is creating subtrusts for your loved ones. It is not for trusts that are doing outright distributions. So you need to make sure you know what type of trust you have and make sure you're doing those beneficiary forms appropriately. If you are doing a form and you are listing a trust as a beneficiary, please seek legal guidance. Your trust needs to say something specifically, and the beneficiary form needs to state something specifically. So we do want you to get legal advice as to how to update those beneficiary forms if you are listing a subtrust or trust for those particular types of assets. If you have a boat, you'll want to retitle and re-register your boat into the name of your trust. And you can do this through paperwork at the Game and Fish Department. So you'll need to go online, find that form, and fill it out to retitle your boat. If you have paper bonds, you'll want to actually turn that paper into an electronic format. Paper is actually really hard to deal with now when someone dies, so we want to have those accounts electronically. They are much easier to deal with. And what you can do is go to Treasury Direct. You can just Google that. There is a process by which you can mail in your paper bonds and they will open up an electronic account, and you can title that account if you have a trust in the name of your trust, which would allow your backup trustee to be able to access it if you do become incapacitated. When you have a trust that just pays outright to beneficiaries when you die, you'll still want to make sure you have all of your updated beneficiary forms, but they may not necessarily say the trust is the beneficiary. So for assets such as pension plans that have a death benefit, life insurance policies, annuities, those types of assets, you can make sure to update a beneficiary form with both a primary beneficiary as well as a backup beneficiary. Here, your trust may be the backup beneficiary, and you may need to call or seek advice on how that trust should be listed on the beneficiary form. If you have any types of business interests, such as LLC interests, you'll want to work with an attorney to make sure that those get assigned properly to your trust so that those avoid the probate process when you do die. If you have corporation interest, we will need to look at your corporate documents to make sure you even have the ability to transfer those assets to your trust or at your death. So anytime you have business interests, please seek the advice of an attorney to figure out the particular process we need to follow in order to have those assets avoid the probate process when you die. If you have a timeshare, whether it's through a deed or whether you have points at a timeshare location, we also need to make sure that we are doing the proper process to make sure those points or that deed avoids probate when you die. Here's another area where you'll want to seek the advice of an attorney to make sure that we can avoid that state's probate process. So if you have a timeshare in another state, we may need to get the guidance of an attorney in that state to see what our options are, as every state may have something different. Here in Arizona, we have a state law that says someone doesn't have to accept a timeshare. When you die and you give it to someone, they can actually disclaim that property and it'll go back to the timeshare location. Sometimes the timeshares we have, our kids don't want, so that might be an option for them here in Arizona, just not to do anything, and the children can disclaim it at your death. Again, this is another great area to get legal advice if you have those types of assets. If you have any digital assets like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, those types of assets can be a little bit tricky when you die from an estate planning process. If you have a trust, we can assign those assets to your trust, but we also want to make sure that we have very well documented what your pass keys are, what your wallets are, because we want to be able to make sure that someone else can access that digital currency when something should happen to you. So that needs to be someplace where they can easily get to it, find it, understand it, and know how to access it. So that information will need to be written down in the back of your estate planning binder. If somebody owes you money and you have a promissory note, you do want to make sure you work with an attorney to get that properly put through to your trust. We do need to do an assignment of that interest, and that way your successor trustee can still collect on that note after you've died. Otherwise, that is also a probate asset that would have to go through the probate process. So make sure you're working with correct legal staff to get that designated appropriately to your trust right now. If you are one of our estate planning clients, at the back of your estate planning binder, there is a tab called Assets and Liabilities. And make sure you are doing this very important homework step. This is where you're going to let everyone know what your assets are. Wherever you write a bill, such as your phone company, your utility companies, your credit card companies, anywhere that you write a bill, you want people to know what that bill is, and we need to know how to communicate with that institution. So in the back of your binder, there's a place to document all of that, where you can put it on a Excel spreadsheet, print it off, put it in your binder. We're looking for things like Chase Bank, credit card account number 1234, and here's the phone number on the back of the card. Or here's Verizon Wireless is my cell phone company, and here's my account number and the 1-800 number to Verizon. We want to make sure that people not only know where your assets are, but know what bills need to be taken care of if something should happen to you. There's also a place to document passwords, and the passwords we especially want to make sure someone can get into your phone, someone can get into your computer, someone can get into your email, because this is where a lot of people keep information on their accounts or even just for their pictures that we want to preserve. Make sure that is documented in the back of your binder as well. You'll also want to make sure to do a couple of other homework items. Number one, if you have done healthcare documents with our office, we always recommend that your backup healthcare decision makers get copies of those documents. We want them to have electronic versions, not paper. That way, if they're called in an emergency and they're at work, they can still pull up those documents easily on their computer or phone, rather than having to go home to get the piece of paper that is stored in their filing cabinet. And lastly, if you have a tangible personal property list in your binder, this is where you again want to document if there's a certain specific something you want to leave to someone. So that might be a jewelry item or a piece of furniture, and that's where you can put what the item it is and who you want it to go to. Make sure you're doing that in your binder as well. One thing I recommend is you choose a particular day or date or month that you will remember to open up your estate planning binder every year and see what updates need to happen. So do you need to record some new passwords? Do you need to make sure that you've changed out a new beneficiary form for your vehicle because you got a new car? My husband and I, we choose December of every year. It's a little bit quieter, and we think that this is a gift to our family anyway. So it's part of our Christmas gift giving that we open up our binder and we update our plan. Think of an important day, holiday, again, birthday, something that you'll remember every year to update your plan as well. If you need help with any of these items, please make sure to reach out and call us for a consultation. We will absolutely help you walk through this process again if you need to. Again, remember, trust funding is super important and will only work if you take on the important task of getting it done.